Hi, guys, and welcome to another true crime story time, where I tell you one true crime case that was solved using forensic science, all while doing today my nails. You guys already know the drill. The comment section is a privilege. Don't fuck it up. Let's get into today's case. Now, this story all takes place in 1997 near Sacramento, California, where Nick Howard lived with his parents Daniel and Lillian, also known as Patty Howard, and his younger sister Jamie. Now, the Howards, they lived right outside of Sacramento, California, and they ran an auto body shop. They all pitched in here and there to help the shop run appropriately. Now, Nick was very close to his younger sister Jamie, and Jamie loved him like he was her best friend. She said he literally was her best friend. Now, Nick, he was 18 years old. He had recently graduated from high school and got his high school diploma. He continued to work at the family auto body shop. But to be honest, Nick really didn't have any aspirations for the future. It wasn't that he didn't have aspirations for the future, he just really wasn't sure yet. You know, he was in that in-between phase of, should I go to college or should I try something else? Is there something else I want to do in life? And believe me, you guys, not everybody needs to go to college. College isn't for everybody. Not everybody want to get into a ton of debt and then have to pay for the rest of their lives. So I totally get it. Obviously, if you don't have the education to pursue your dreams, then you probably need to go to college or some place to learn it, or maybe not college, but you have to kind of figure out a way to learn how to get that education or that information. Anyway, enough said about school. Nick's parents weren't really big on their children staying home, and not going to college or not at least knowing what they wanted to do with their lives. Now, although Patty was not a huge fan of Nick staying home, not going to school, she did understand that he just didn't know what he wanted to do at the time. So eventually she did agree and told him that it was okay if he lived at home and didn't go to college as long as he worked. One evening on February 5th, 1997, Nick went to a restaurant called Tony's Place in Walnut Grove. He was actually at the restaurant earlier that day and had forgotten his driver's license and left it there. So he had to unfortunately go back to get his driver's license. But by the time Nick had arrived to the restaurant, it was closed. So he just left a note for the owner letting them know that he would be back later some other time to get his license. Nick always let his family know what he was doing. So if he was coming home late from work, he would tell them, hey, I'm coming home late from work. If he was leaving or if he was hanging out with friends, he would oftentimes let his parents know where he was. So Nick just left a message on his family's answering machine telling them that he was on his way home, but that he was running late because he had ran into some car trouble and he was expecting to be home within an hour and a half, and that, he would see them when he arrived. However, Nick, he never arrived. Immediately, Patty knew something was wrong. This was not like her son, Nick. Oh my God, my Amazon food order is here. And she immediately called the sheriff's department the next morning. Nick's father, Daniel, went out to search for Nick. He drove up and down the river roads. He went down the same route that Nick would usually take from the restaurant. He just tried to retrace all the steps he thought that Nick would have taken to get back home and to see if maybe perhaps Nick could not fix his car and it was on the side of the road. He could help. They didn't know. Now, to get to this particular restaurant, you had to drive up a very dark, curvy road with the Sacramento River on one side and a 30-foot drop on the other side, just to kind of give you guys, driving-wise in your brains, what Nick would have been driving down. So it's either the Sacramento River or a 30-foot drop, or you were on the road, basically. So just so happened a few days ago, before Nick disappeared, that there was a crash and someone had gone into the river and died. I mean, that's fucking scary. This is why I don't like driving. Like, I'm not gonna lie, I'm not the best driver. I hate it. It gives me anxiety, and this just proves my point for the reason why I don't want to drive, especially in California, because girl, those mountains, they be curvy, they be coming at you. Very dangerous. If you're in the dark and you're not paying attention for whatever reason, there is a chance that you could go off either side of that cliff. The last thing that the Howards wanted to believe was that Nick could have gone off the side of the road. This is something that the Howards obviously did not want to think about, but it had to be considered. Days later, 2 volunteers of the search effort to find Nick discovered tire tracks leading from the road down to the riverbank. They immediately contacted police. Now, California Highway Patrol and YOLO, I know, guys, but that's what they're called. I swear it's called YOLO County officers. So, California Highway Patrol and YOLO County officers converged at the scene and called in the divers. 2 days after Nick's disappearance, officers found Nick's empty Mazda 626 at the bottom of the river. It was submerged about 18 feet into the water. So the divers came in, they pulled the vehicle out of the water. If you guys have ever seen Adventures with a Purpose, this is like similar to what they do. Basically, these guys did that same thing. They came in, they pulled the car out of the water, and they sent the car in. Now, when they pulled the car from the water, there was no sign of Nick's body. So the car was completely empty. So at this point, they had Nick's car, but they didn't have Nick. So what happened to Nick? For the family, it's kind of like good and bad news, because thank God that they didn't find him in the car, because now we know that he could still be alive. But then also they didn't find him in the car, so they don't know where he is. So it's like he could still be in danger. I feel like that's even worse, because you just don't know what happened. Like if they found him in the car, then they would know where he was, but it wouldn't be good news. But anyway, the car was taken in for examination. When investigators examined the radiator in Nick's vehicle, they found contact marks from the fan melt, indicating that the car had been running when it entered the water. No sign of Nick's body could be found in the car or anywhere else near the vehicle. Where could Nick have gone? And obviously, if the vehicle was still running when it fell into the river, you would assume that someone had hit the accelerator, meaning someone was inside of the vehicle. You would think. I don't know. It's so bizarre. Now, investigators were not ready to give up. I mean, they didn't have a body, but still, they thought there has to be some clue in the car as to where Nick could have gone. So as they're searching the vehicle, they discover a pair of broken glasses that belonged to Nick. The glasses were found on the car floor. Now, this was the only indication at that time that he had even been in the vehicle when it went into the water. Crime scene investigators also noticed that the windows to the vehicle had been rolled down. This gave Patty hope that Nick may have escaped the vehicle safely. She thought he may have had a head injury and just couldn't remember who he was, and maybe he kind of just, walked off and got lost. Another bizarre discovery that investigators found on the vehicle was a layer of white milky film on the dashboard. Now, initially, they had no idea what the substance was, but after the forensic scientists examined it, they determined it was motor oil. And it just so happened that while searching Nick's trunk, investigators found an empty bottle of Valvoline motor oil. So they were thinking this is probably where the oil came from this empty can. I mean, it makes sense, right? It appeared that the motor oil had spilled in the back and somehow made its way into the passenger part of the vehicle while it was being submerged. One theory investigators came up with was that Nick fell asleep behind the wheel. A driver whose car drifts while they are asleep is usually awakened by the drift and swerves to correct the path of travel. I mean, usually that's what happens. When this happens, evidence is generally left behind on the road, like swerve marks or even the tire treads, something like this. Investigators decided to take a closer look at the street near where Nick's car was found, and they found nothing. There was no disturbance whatsoever. There was no tread marks or anything on the gravel, so it looked like nothing happened. Additionally, investigators had no clue where Nick's body was, so the theory did not fit either. If Nick was in the car and he did swerve off the road like their theory suggested, his body would have been found in the car or in the water. However, they had no evidence to support any of those theories. So they really was just like back at square one. They didn't know what to think at this point. It was as though Nick had just magically disappeared during this car accident. Investigators started to think that Nick's disappearance may not have been an accident. Now, Nick, he drove a stick shift, and the stick shift in the car was set in neutral. Then, investigators found a blue bottle cap holding the throttle open when they searched under the hood, marked with the letter V for Valvoline. It was the cap for the empty motor oil bottle investigators found in the trunk earlier. Now, despite not knowing what the blue cap meant, investigators knew something wasn't right. It looked like the car had been rigged. They believed someone put the bottle cap under the hood to hold down the gas pedal. As a result, the vehicle could run into the river without a driver. Using the same bottle cap in the same position under the hood, investigators reenacted their theory at the crime scene. A driver was placed behind the vehicle's wheel as a safety precaution. The car started moving on its own as soon as the engine started. According to the accident reconstructionist expert, the car traveled at about 25 miles per hour. As the vehicle descended into the embankment, its speed increased to 15 miles per hour. Next, investigators wanted to find out if Nick was wearing his glasses at the time of the accident. To prove this theory, they created a replica of Nick's head made of styrofoam. They added weight to the styrofoam head to make it weigh about the same amount as a human skull. Investigators fitted the styrofoam head with an identical pair of Nick's glasses. They simulated the force of the crash by attaching the styrofoam head to a pendulum. Investigators then lifted the head to the given height and then they let it go. When the styrofoam head hit the steering wheel, the glasses were less damaged than the actual pair of glasses they found in Nick's vehicle. They determined Nick's glasses didn't break from the car smashing into the river, but something before that. Investigators now believe that someone had planted the broken glasses in Nick's car. Because Nick's body hadn't been found, his family still hoped he was alive. Despite praying for the best, they prepared for the worst. A 3-week search for Nick ended when his body was discovered a quarter-mile from where his car was submerged. The news that Nick had been found devastated his family, especially his mother, Patty, and Nick's sister, Jamie, who considered Nick to be her best friend. An autopsy was performed on Nick's body, and they didn't find any motor oil on it. This further supported the investigators' theory that Nick was not inside the car when it went into the river. During Nick's autopsy, the pathologist found evidence that someone had beaten him. His body was so badly decomposed, investigators had to bring in a forensic odontologist, and they were able to identify him based off of his dental records. For further examination, the medical examiners found that Nick had been beaten and then thrown into the river. Amongst many injuries, he had bleeding in his neck muscles, also known as strap muscle hemorrhage. This injury is due to manual strangulation. Nick suffered bruises and blunt force trauma throughout his body. The water in Nick's lungs suggested that Nick was still alive and breathing when he was thrown into the river, thus causing him to actually die of drowning. So police believe that he was unconscious when he was thrown into the river, but still breathing. Ultimately, the cause of death was ruled a homicide, and the manner of death was drowning. Investigators searched for Nick's murderer based on who they thought would benefit from his death. So the investigators started with people that Nick knew, that was around Nick, his friends, his family members, his co-workers. They started to interview everyone that was in Nick's circle. They discovered that Nick had several significant life insurance policies. In one insurance policy, he had paid out $850,000. What would an 18-year-old young man, generally healthy, need an $850,000 life insurance policy? I mean, This just makes no sense to me. Investigators found Nick's life insurance policy odd. So police wanted to know who was the beneficiaries of this life insurance policy for this young man. After learning that his family was not the beneficiaries of his life insurance policy, they were shocked. And even his family were shocked. They were shocked that the life insurance policy was so large and that they were not beneficiaries at all. Patty was shocked, okay? His mom was shocked. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. And, she went through his room. She started looking through his things because this just made no sense. After going through his things, she discovered an application for a change of beneficiary in Nick's room. There was a signature on the crumpled piece of paper, and the signature was a man named Ralph Marcus. Now, it turned out that Nick had taken out the policy on himself after lying to an agent. He said that he planned to get married and take over his parents' business, according to court documents from 2001. He paid the premium, which cost him about a fourth of his monthly income. Now, Ralph had a long history with the Howard family, particularly Patty, Nick's mother. Ralph Marcus was a 37-year-old unemployed man who obviously was familiar with the Howard family. However, he had a very strained relationship with the Howard family. Just to give you guys a little background on Ralph and Patty's relationship. In 1973, Ralph met Patty. Ralph was 17 at the time and Patty was 14. Now, he immediately started hitting on her and made some advances, which was unwarranted. She did not want to talk with him. He even tried one time pinning her down and trying to do something to her. I don't know. This guy was a creepo. He was a major creepo. Now, he claimed that he just wanted to show her some arm wrestling moves. Buddy, who's going to buy that? Nobody's buying that, okay? Thanks. Get that out of here. Some would say it's borderline essay. I think that is full-blown essay because you shouldn't be touching anybody that ain't wanting you to touch them. But anyway, that's just me. Patty immediately friend-zoned him. She did not want anything to do with him, but he continued to follow Patty. He was obsessed with her. He couldn't help himself, and he just always followed her around. Even years later, after Patty had already been married to Dan Howard, Ralph still kept trying to get with her. He just wouldn't stop. This guy even persisted into their marriage. Now, I can't understand why, for the life of me, she didn't just be just get rid of him, why her husband Daniel didn't just get rid of him, why they continued to entertain his buffoonery. However, they did. In October of 1986 letter to Patty's sister, Ralph said that the emptiness he felt without Patty would be like for you if your children were taken away forever. He's tripping, cause he's tripping. All right, ain't nothing like that. So I don't know what. I don't even have children, and I know ain't nothing like that. If somebody tried to take away Lucy, for me, no, there's nothing that would compare to that. So, no. This guy was clearly off his rocker and obsessed. He is so obsessed with Patty, and he just wants to be a part of her life so badly that he forms a connection with her son, Nick. This is a huge problem. What on earth? Your stalker is now forming relationships with your children, and it's oh yeah, he's just a regular stalker. What is happening here? I'm just so confused. Anyway, Ralph continued to hang around Patty and her family until 1993, when he made a very strange, I would say it was an outlandish request to have a baby with Patty, you guys. Are you kidding me? Where's Patty's husband? I need to talk to Patty's husband ASAP. Because he ain't on his business. What is he doing? Letting a stalker? What? No. This was enough for Patty. This prompted her to finally tell Ralph to get lost because she couldn't handle it anymore. She just finally told him, just get lost forever. I'm never going to do anything with you. I don't want to have any children with you. The whole thing sounds crazy to me. I almost feel was she having an affair with him this entire time? Maybe she wasn't, but this just sounds so bizarre. Why on earth would you allow your stalker to stick around for that long? And why does he think he can ask for things like this? This is insanity. Even though Patty kicked Ralph out of her life for good, Nick, her son, still stayed in touch with Ralph. Now, Ralph, he lived in Orange Valley. I think that's how you say it. Orange Valley, I'm guessing. He had started living in Orange Valley back when Nick was 16, and he would sometimes hire him to work on landscaping jobs and, random jobs. This man is holding on to whatever he can get. He's just trying to be a part of this lady's life. Let's just say that this guy, Ralph, was not a good guy. When police looked into his past, they did find that he had a criminal record. Ralph Art Marcus enjoyed a flashy lifestyle but was unable to keep a job. So I have no idea what he was doing back then and how he did it. Obviously, he was a criminal. Now, Nick's parents could not convince their son to stay away from Ralph. No matter how hard they tried, it seemed like Ralph was starting to impress Nick, whom he referred to as his godchild. In Patty's mind, Ralph planned to kill Nick from the beginning. Now, this is when Patty started to think maybe it's Ralph. Investigators needed to find out who this Ralph character was. So investigators, they decide they're going to go and they're going to pick up Ralph and they're going to talk to this Ralph character. When investigators spoke to Ralph, he denied any knowledge of Nick's murder. When he was questioned by investigators, he told them that on the night of the crash, he had an alibi. And according to Ralph's mother, who was supposed to be his alibi, he was at home with her. However, during a search, the detectives found all the paperwork concerning Nick's life insurance policies on the desk in Ralph's bedroom. This is very suspicious. They wanted to confirm that the signatures from Nick on the document was genuine. At this point, they weren't sure if Nick actually signed the documents, if he was forced into signing the documents, or if this guy just had the documents faked. Why would Nick sign his life insurance policies over to this guy, who was a stalker of his mother? It just didn't make sense. So they hired a handwriting analyst. And this handwriting analyst reviewed all of the documents and came to the conclusion that the signature was, in fact, Nick's genuine signature. So Nick had signed those documents. So investigators speculated that at the time, Nick and Ralph planned to defraud the insurance companies by faking the death of Nick. Investigators didn't have any evidence of insurance fraud, though. They speculated that Ralph had to somehow been involved in Nick's murder regardless of this theory. Now, before he died, Nick told his sister he planned to make Ralph the beneficiary of his life insurance policy. I don't know why she didn't speak up sooner and let everybody know this, but they found out. And despite her warning Nick, saying it was a bad idea, this guy is a fucking psychopath, Nick thought it would be best. Because, Nick was 18, fresh out of high school, he was a young man looking to make money fast. And when an older guy offers you this sort of support and you look up to them, of course you're going to take it. According to Jamie, she said Nick told her that Ralph could take the $850,000 and turn it into millions. If Nick's family had that kind of money, they wouldn't have to work again. Ralph Marcus made his living through insurance scams for the most of his life. And this is the reason why, when investigators did the background check, they immediately started to think that Ralph and Nick was in cahoots. He allegedly burned down his house to receive an insurance payout. Although investigators believed Ralph was the suspect, they had no concrete evidence connecting him to the murder. Attempts were made to connect Ralph with the motor oil bottle. Maybe they could get his prints off of the bottle. They weren't sure, but they were trying everything that they could. So they served a search warrant on Ralph's home, hoping to find some clue, and they found another bottle of Valvoline motor oil with the same lot number, as the one in Nick's trunk, proving that they came from the same batch. They finally had a piece of evidence to link Ralph Marcus to Nick's murder. Prosecutors theorized that Ralph Marcus was fed up with Patty Howard constantly ignoring his advances. over the years, he had really tried to get her attention and she just wasn't having it. And he got fed up with it. So Ralph became more active in Nick's life, influencing him to fake his own death by crashing his car. Now, considering the fact that Ralph liked flashy things but could never hold a job, that he told people he had made a living as a gambler, like, that's not a great living, sir. He also resided rent-free with his mother and his stepfather for years. He did do sporadic contracting work here and there, but he needed money for a new home. The bank was set to take ownership of his mother's house because of a reverse mortgage. So they thought possibly this could be his motive. He did need the money. He also was pissed at Patty. He was doing drug runs and insurance frauds. Like, allegedly in 1970s, Ralph had set his own house on fire, like I told you guys, and stayed in the burning structure until he almost died just to get the insurance money. Isn't that nutso? He faked an auto theft, he faked a burglary, and property damage. He faked from some auto accidents. Like, he faked. This man was a master faker. That's what he was. He's a faker, fake. He acted surprised to hear that anybody had named him as a beneficiary when the police first came to him. And he denied having anything to do with any insurance fraud scheme whatsoever. He said that never happened. But some of Ralph's acquaintances later came forward and told police that Ralph knew about the beneficiary switch and offered varying reasons for the change. He told one associate that Nick didn't trust his own parents and wanted Ralph to administer the money to his family in a prudent way. After Nick's far-fetched death, Ralph said that he would turn over any money or any insurance money to the Howard family, but he later backpedaled that and never gave them a dime. It later came out that Ralph told his friend that Nick's car was going around 85 miles an hour when it hit the water. How would he know that? Unless he was involved. So, I mean, it's pretty clear at this point that he was involved. Also, later, one of Nick's friends came forward and told police that she knew about the plan to fake his death, that she knew Nick told her he was going to fake his own death and then hide in Mexico before returning to the U.S. to collect on his life insurance. But Susan told him that the insurance companies don't pay off until the policyholder has been missing for several years. That information did not sit well with Nick, according to her. On July 11th, 1997, detectives from the Yolo County Sheriff's Office arrested Ralph and charged him with the murder of Nick. Ralph pleaded not guilty. No one knows whether Ralph killed Nick because Nick wanted to back out of the deal or the plan that they had, or if it was always his plan to kill Nick for real. Whatever the reason, we know that Ralph brutally murdered Nick. Ralph strangled and beat Nick before throwing his body into the Sacramento River to make it appear that Nick had crashed his car and died in the accident. He planted Nick's broken glasses on the floor of his car. Ralph placed his motor oil bottle cap under the hood to hold down the gas, throwing the bottle into the trunk. He started the car, which rolled into the Sacramento River. Now, Patty Howard, she's very skeptical about Nick's insurance scheme. She doesn't believe, or I would say doesn't want to believe, that her son would be a part of something like that. She believes that it was all Ralph's doing. What parent would want to believe that their child was capable of doing something like that or would be in on something like that? However, according to the handwriting analysts, the signatures say otherwise. Nevertheless, according to investigators, Nick told everyone he would become a millionaire before he turned 30. I mean, the fact that he's going around telling everybody that he's going to become a millionaire before he turned 30 and all of these things, I mean, he kind of gave it up. Like, I mean, I wouldn't want to believe that about my son either, but I would also look at the evidence and what he was telling his friends, and it sounded like he was pretty much in on it. The trial started on October 5th of 1999. Now, the prosecution went with the theory that Ralph plotted the insurance scheme from the beginning, that he always planned to kill Nick in the end. They think that Ralph was just manipulating and using Nick and telling him that he was going to be in on this deal when he never really planned to share any of that money with Nick, and his plan was always to actually kill Nick. I mean, because if you think about it, why would he split the money with him when Nick already signed all of his money over to Ralph? All he has to do now is just to get rid of Nick, and now he has all the money for himself. Anyway, it would be less to have to worry about and to have to wait on for the 7 years thing, hiding Nick and keeping him undercover and things like that if he was actually dead. All I can say is don't plan your own murder. Like, don't fake your own murder. Thanks to forensic science and some good police work, Ralph Alvin Marcus was convicted of murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Today, Ralph Marcus, 67, is serving his sentence in Mule Creek State Prison in Eon, California. What did you guys think about this case and my nails? I love it. I decided to go with a little clean girl look this time. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. If you like videos like these, you can check out some of my other episodes. I'll leave them linked right here on the screen. Thank you guys so much for liking, commenting, and subscribing, and for always continuing to support me. I appreciate it so much, and I will see you guys next time with another true crime story time. Bye.